What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Survivor Now podcast. My name is Randy, and today we are here to cover episode 9 of Survivor Game Changers, our summer rewatch series, reinventing how the game is played, which has been the theme this entire season because they mention Game Changers at least 9 times every single episode. But before I introduce who's going to be covering this episode with me this evening, go ahead and there's some housekeeping stuff to get out of the way. Go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. If you're listening on Spotify, go ahead and leave us a rating. Make sure to head over to our Patreon page to check out all the amazing content we have going on over there. And you can check out all of our coverage on our Instagram at Survivor Now Podcast or our website or survivornowpodcast.com. Almost did that perfectly. But today I am joined by my usual co-host, usual panel, Will and Cara. Guys, how are we doing? Yeah, and I didn't do the clap. Maybe we retired that finally.
I think it's best we retire it. You know, treat it like the talking stick from Survivor Borneo. True shout out there.
Also, just like the do or die advantage.
Yeah. Wasn't it an advantage?
Hourglass?
I don't think it was an advantage of the do or die. I think that was just legitimately the worst twist Survivor has ever concocted. I'm so glad it's gone.
I think I agree. Like, that's a tangent for another day, but like
at least the knowledge or the hourglass, like, you can, like, it sucks, but it's not over. Do or die, it is legitimately a Mario Party chance time.
Yeah, like, who thought of it? Let's just throw something in that gives you a what was it? It was like a 1 in or a 2 and
1
3
1/3 chance to survive.
Yeah, like, who thought? It's just totally random. There's really no even strategy. It's just like, hey, you have to do this do or die twist because you were the first one out of the challenge. That's a game-changing twist, but not a game-changing twist in the good way.
True.
But we're here to talk episode 9 of Survivor Game Changers, a series that we've been covering all summer, and we're down to, like, I think the last 5-ish episodes here. I think there's 13 or 14 episodes this season. So, initial reactions before we get into covering everything. Cara, we have been vocal, or at least I have, more than you guys, about how, man, this season has kind of slowed down and it's been kind of a drag to get through. What did you think of this episode?
Yeah, it's funny that you guys have been saying that because I feel like, I mean, I guess I've said it too, like, some episodes have been boring, but this one I feel like wasn't as bad as a few of the previous ones. Like, I actually feel like I have things I want to comment on. Like, I liked things that happened, and I feel like this was a good episode besides who went home. Sad about that.
Super sad. Like, I feel like that's almost every elimination now. Like, whoever goes home, it's like, we love them. Like, almost every elimination. Well, what did you think of the episode? Much like, myself and Cara this season, you've also been kind of vocal with Game Changers has great moments, but bad editing. How was this one? Was it good? Good episode?
All right. So here's an analogy for y'all. This episode is like a nice burger. Like, is the burger anyone's favorite food item? Maybe, but it's always like a B tier, middle of the road. Like,
I would say chicken tenders personally.
Chicken tenders, I feel like they have their community, but like it's a nice. It's hard to have like an amazing, magnificent burger. A burger is usually just a good food item. This episode, it was just a good episode in the sense that I feel like it was very complete, where it was a very by the books. It was a very linear episode as well.
Great way to put it. Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say.
And I think that's, I mean, sometimes people don't like that because they like the mystery of, who's going home? I don't know what's going on. But I think that was a big problem with the season, especially with the Aussie vote in particular. And so I think this was just a classic Survivor blindside. And I thought it was a good episode.
No, I mean, if we're bringing in the food analogies, let me just say the reason I said chicken tenders is because I feel like chicken tenders, when you go out to a restaurant, is a very safe choice. It's like, I don't know what I'm feeling like. I think I'll just get the chicken tenders and fries. This was a very safe episode. It was a very copy and paste Survivor episode, very run of the mill, which isn't bad for a season that has had some pretty questionable editing so far, some highs and some lows. It was nice to get an episode that was just normal Survivor. We saw strategy. I mean, we saw a lot of people kind of running around trying to figure out what their next move was because we saw this big alliance get broken up last week. And it was interesting that they could have went into this week with another alliance of 6, right? Sarah could have just stayed with the group she went with, and this is how we're going to vote. I flipped the page on my last alliance, and we're just going to vote out Brad and Sierra's group, bang, 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 pagong them, and get to the final 6. That wasn't the case this episode. Like, it just seemed like it was one of those situations where the tide had turned, and instead of everyone getting complacent with the alliance that they're in, it was almost like, hey, it's time to start playing the game, and we need to start figuring out who we want to go to the end with. Will, did you get that kind of same feeling from this episode?
Yeah, like I feel like in terms of the season, I feel like it's just kind of like the late mid game, oddly enough, despite there being a lot of people left in the game where people are thinking long term. And I feel like we kind of, for a while, it was a season dominated by 2 sides. And now it's like we're looking at the hyenas, as Tony Vlaco would say, really starting to take over and run the show. A lot of quieter voices, I feel like, have been shown a lot more. And I think it's very interesting storytelling, and it's something where I feel like you have to really pay attention to the season. You can't just watch it episode to episode to really appreciate like Aubrey voting correctly, you know, or how Sarah's kind of coming into her own strategically in this game. And so I do agree. I think it also plays really well off the heels of the last episode, and I think sets us up for the end game. But it doesn't mean that the next episode's the end game, if that makes sense.
I mean, Cara, it was interesting seeing. I mean, Will brought him up. It's been a game dominated by kind of 2 power duos in a sense, but especially Brad and Sierra, who have worked together the entire game. That wasn't really the case this episode. And we're going to get into it a little bit more later on about how the strategy talk went. But it was interesting to kind of see them. I mean, we started the episode with them coming back to camp and being like, wow, great move, guys. You got us. And then obviously asking, who was it? Sarah just, it was me. That was me. Took credit for the move. But it was interesting watching Brad's expression, Sierra's expression when they figured out, hey, we're on the bottom now, and we got to figure out where our next route to the end is.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, being on the bottom isn't like the worst spot to be when you're on Survivor. I feel like that's almost the best place to be, because we see how it played out in this episode. Like, none of them ended up going anyway. So they were kind of put in a better position than they probably were if they stayed together.
Will, you had a little thing to say there to Cara?
Okay, I wouldn't say being on the bottom is
not the best position, but like it
was Will's little.
I mean, like
not the best. That was too strong of a word.
Like if I go on Survivor, I'd want to be on the bottom the entire time too, because I feel like it lets you play more scrappy. You don't have to play as clean on the bottom. I feel like that's all one big discussion for another time too, of like the different positions and what that means. A lot of good game theory there, but it's also interesting to see Brad back on the bottom, because I think back to Blood versus Water, and I feel like Brad is used to being on the bottom, and it was weird seeing him in Game Changers being a top dog, right? And it's also
dominating most of the game, like
dominating. It's weird seeing Troyzan as a top dog, and Sierra, you know, it's weird seeing her visible on a season, because I don't care much about her part. But you know what I mean? It's like a lot of these players, they were top dogs only in this season, and so it's interesting seeing them and how they act now versus their first outing, if that makes sense.
No, it definitely makes sense. And I think the dynamics of the game have gotten really interesting, to the sense of, like, I was worried watching the past couple of weeks that this group of 6 were just going to run wild and go to the final 6, even though I said that I believe that's the move you should make. And this kind of just opened up the game. But I do want to loop back around to the Sarah situation. It takes a lot of nerve to own up. And I mean, no one else can take that move away from her now. If she makes it to the end of the game, she can, hey, that was my move. I told you I was the one that flipped on you guys. I thought it would be better if I went with this group. Strong, powerful moment for Sarah Cara. And that's someone who we haven't really seen a lot of so far this season. She started coming into her own the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, there's been a lot of Sarah moments, a lot of like throughout the season, there's been a lot of like, I feel like key moments of Sarah, like giving her thoughts, her input, and especially like in this episode, like we really saw that a lot more. Like she's really a key player in it. And I feel like they're not really catching on to that yet, or at least they're not showing it as much if they are like looking at her.
Would we say this season so far has been good gameplay? Like, do we feel like it's been good gameplay, or do we feel like it's been a little sloppy gameplay? Because I could see you making the argument both ways.
Yes. I think the pre-merge it was very sloppy. I think Tony Vlachos putting a target on his back, JT,
JT.
I mean, come on. Malcolm's still gone. R.I.P. Malcolm. Still not over it. But I think the merge has been a lot of great gameplay, which is weird because I feel like there's not really a lot of like fantastic players in the sense that there's the Survivor legends are quiet and it's dictated by like Debbie and by Sierra and
nobody's worried about Debbie,
Michaela Bradshaw and players who I think it's interesting seeing them now play a good game under the Game Changers logo, because it's like when you think of Game Changers, you're not thinking of this cast, and especially the people that are still in the game outside of Suri and maybe Aubrey and maybe Sarah.
You wouldn't even say Ty in there. Ty's a big personality.
Ty, he's a big personality, but he's not a big game player. He's not an active player, I'd say.
Okay, that's fair.
I make that distinction a lot.
I mean, that's definitely fair. I mean, those are the big names still left in this season. There's a lot of dynamics that we're going to dive into. I want to go ahead and get to this first challenge. And this is something that it rarely happens, but Cara and I were discussing the first challenge before even going on air. This was fun. This was really fun. Why do we not have more challenges like this in modern, Survivor US? And what I mean by that is there was like a whole scaffolding structure, and basically they had to, one player got on the bench and the other players had to pull to get that bench to raise, and they basically had to grab boxed tiles that were numbered, that were like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to I believe 30, and they had to do that in order. So you couldn't grab like 1 and then 3 and then 7. Like you had to go in order, which caused a headache, I'm sure, for the people actually taking part in the challenge, where you had to go up and then down and up and then down. And then we see one of the longest puzzles ever. They are sitting there for an hour trying to figure out this word. And sure enough, it ends up being reinventing, which leads to the phrase reinventing how the game is played, which is the title of the episode. Before I go to you, Cara, about how you felt about this, I felt Jeff gave them a hint. Am I wrong in thinking that? Like he had this, like at the hour mark, he said something, I can't remember word for word, but it was along the lines of, this is why you're here. Survivor, as the game continues to grow, the puzzles are going to continue to change, which at first I was like, is that so, Jeff? Is that so? Because nowadays we get the same puzzles every single season. So some foreshadowing, I was like, Jeff must have forgot he said that back during Survivor Game Changers. But then he kept going on. He's like, everything's always changing in Survivor. And that's when it kind of hit Andrea when she was like, reinventing. I think it's reinventing. I almost feel like this is Jeff Probst giving them a hint of like, Jesus Christ,
Yeah.
we've been here for an
It
hour.
probably
Like,
was.
he's like spoon feeding them the word. Cara, why did you love this challenge so much? Because it was one of the first things we talked about off air.
Yeah, immediately, like, as they started playing this challenge, like, I loved it. I feel like it was just so unique to what we see now that it was fun to see. I hope they bring this back. I really enjoyed it. It was just a really all-around good challenge.
It was like
Really
a breath of fresh air. Like
Yeah.
that's the right
Was.
way to say it. Would you want to be the person going up, or would you
Yes.
want to do the pulling?
Oh, going up.
Yeah.
For sure.
No, I agree. I feel like I wouldn't get nominated though because I'm pretty tall. I got good weight on me.
Yeah, I got
so
lots of muscle, Randy. I see the 6-pack.
You can call it muscle. I think in English they call it fat. But yeah, I mean we'll look at it. Muscle.
In Baltimore we call it muscle.
Yeah.
And,
Will, what do you
I would never be on the chair. I'd be like, "Can I go on the chair?" And they'd be like, "No." What are you doing?
I would be so mad if I'm like, hey guys, I want to do the chair, and they just look me up and down, and they're like, no, I don't think so. Cara, I feel like you would for sure go on the chair.
Yeah, I think so too. I feel like I would be so light where it would just be easy. It would just be good.
I
It
would
would
drop
be-
it.
Maneuver it.
I would I'd pull it up and then just let go of the rope, and you would just fall.
Why?
Why?
You should-
Everybody, Will just admitted that he would just drop the structure.
Okay, I don't want to go in the chair anymore.
Yeah, you don't want to go in the chair now. All right, it looks like.
Why would you do? Okay, that's only acceptable, Will, if it's like a strategy. Like you get her all the way up to the top, and then you just drop it, and she goes down super fast, and then you like
I
catch
want
it.
to just grab them all.
No, what I do is I'd like pull her up to the very top and be like, "All right, if you don't tell me, if you vote me out, I will drop it." I blackmail Cara.
Oh my gosh, that would have been a power move. I'm still shocked you said that, but it would have been a power move if you got your rival up there and you're like, I'm just gonna leave you up there. How about you tell me who has the idol? Because I know you know.
I
That
know.
would be crazy.
Who's
just
who's
let him do
out
it.
first on
Drop
your
it.
alliance? Who do you not trust? Can't say me.
Turn it into a strategical advantage. Will, did you like this challenge?
Oh yeah, it's different. It's something that lasted a long time. It's not something that we see often. So yeah, no, it's a very fun challenge. I think that's also why I like the episode, despite it being very straightforward, is because it was a fun challenge, and sometimes that's all you need.
Were you guys trying to piece together like what the word could be? Because I felt awful because there was one moment that Culpepper said a word. He's like, maybe it could be this, and Andrea almost like scuffed at him. She was like. Like that would be me.
Yeah.
I would be saying so many words. I feel like I would say something and the camera would zoom in on me. They would add the subtitles and it wouldn't even be a word. And I feel like someone would look at me and be like, Randy, what are you doing? Like one, I should not be on the puzzle. That's just especially a spelling puzzle. And there was quite a bit of, well, no, I guess not spelling. I was thinking of a different immunity challenge that happened a couple episodes ago, the immunity one. But there's also a reward with this challenge. You get to fly in a helicopter and go to a Survivor spa. This is a reward that I feel like I wouldn't want to go in personally because I don't ever want to go on a helicopter.
Really?
Yeah,
Why?
I have like this fear of helicopters, like not to get morbid, but I feel like if there's ever an issue, you're going down and you're done. You're done for.
Okay, but imagine this. You'd be the only person in the history of Survivor to be on a helicopter crash on the show. That is kind of notable.
Like, Kara's like, what are we?
Well, it's kind of morbid this episode.
Well, last week we were talking about Taco Bell and food. In this episode, I felt like, I'm in the spirit.
Yeah.
We had a team meeting earlier. I was talking about Halloween, and I feel like this just needed to turn.
This is my second time in like third hour with Randy and Cara, so I feel like at this point I'm running off fume trying to make it more interesting.
Cara, okay, turn us back in a positive route before Will and I just end up ruining this entire show here. I mean, we've talked about it before. This is a huge reward in terms of Survivor and what awards or rewards or whatever you usually get. Going to the Survivor spa is a big one. When Jeff said, hey, you're going to get to sleep, and everyone was just like, oh, thank God. Like, this is such a great reward. And we said the people who went earlier. It was Culpepper, Andrea, Aubrey. Oh, I'm almost there. Zeke, and one more.
Sarah,
yes. So this is a very interesting group because you have Culpepper who's trying to weasel his way back in. He obviously has kind of Zeke in his back pocket. He has, I can't remember if he has Aubrey or not, but there's a good dynamic of players that you can start talking about the next move. And this is where we get kind of Andrea throwing Zeke under the bus. And we hear her in confessional say, I am never going to be able to trust Zeke again ever since he turned on me. And it has me once again being like, I don't remember him turning on you that bad. Like, he didn't turn directly on you. It wasn't like he was trying to vote you out of the game. If I remember correctly, he wasn't trying to. I mean, Will, this is Andrea going right back to where we saw her a couple weeks back.
Yeah.
Zeke needs to lead the game.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much resolve there would be between her and Zeke. I feel like at a certain point, it's like they're able to work together for a vote or two. I still, again, don't know what the beef was. I feel like it's something that was just caught, maybe not on camera. Do you know what it reminds me of? Kind of. This is really bad to say.
Are we going back morbid now? What?
It's not morbid, but it reminds me of Survivor One World, right? Where Colton and Bill had a lot of beef due to something that happened off camera, and how out of nowhere they just had a big rivalry. It feels very similar, but not as dark as Survivor One World. And I think honestly they just have a clash where they both are game players at their core, and I think the way they try to enunciate their game and articulate themselves just clashes with the other. Because I feel like Zeke is a lot more game forward, where he's like, hey, I feel like we need to do this, and this is the right play, and this is why. And Andrea's more like socially based, I think, where she's like, hey, what is the right move? Trying to coerce someone into coming up with her idea, if that makes sense. Yeah, no, it is fun though to just see this rivalry because I feel like they're both really nice and really cool people. It's just weird how of anyone on the season that they had beef and not like Michaela and someone else, because Michaela doesn't have beef with anyone, Randy.
I forgot Michaela was in the game. I already forgot all about it.
Yeah, JT goes and Michaela's chilling. All right. Zeke and Andrea, though, they're still beefing. So what's going on?
I mean, Cara, are you shocked in this moment that Andrea goes right back to Zeke, or was this more of an instance that you expected it? You heard her bring up Zeke's name, and you're like, yep, we're going back down this path.
No, I'm not surprised that's where she wanted to go this time. Every time they talk about having beef, though, I am like, where did this come from? But I'm not surprised that she would want to go for him after all of this, so it makes sense.
I think the confusing part is it all goes back to that 2-hour episode where the first half of the episode they're joking around, they're laying in the shelter and like having an amazing time, and then the second half of the episode, Andrea's like, how dare he do this? How dare he turn on me? And that just makes absolutely no sense. And I think that's been one of the biggest editing blocks or editing problems this season. This is such an integral part of how the season has played out these last couple episodes. And it's a conflict that we don't really have an answer as to why. But she obviously throws out Zeke's name. And at this point, Andrea is trying to garner her troops. She's trying to gather whoever she can to make this vote happen. And it looks like Andrea doesn't really care who she gets. She just wants to get the right people to go against Zeke. We saw so many conversations occurring between people. And that's not even mentioning back at camp before they even get back, how Sierra's kind of like, I got to figure out my next route. Ty talks about how he finally feels like he is at the bottom, and this is time that he needs to figure out his situation. There's a lot of people right now in this game, and it's a crucial part of the game. Where at this point, I believe we were at the final 10, maybe final 9. Forgive me if I messed that up. Will's looking right now. Thank you for fact checking.
Final 10.
Final 10. At this point, we're in the final 10. Such a crucial part of the game because you don't want to set up your end game too early. But you're getting to that point where you need to have a game plan or you're going to be left behind. So out of everything that you saw during this time period of like strategical speaking, Will, I'll go to you first here. What stood out to you? Is there a player who stood out to you who they do need to make a move? Is there a player overplaying? What stood out to you during this kind of strategical talk?
I think one big thing is, again, Ty, because Ty is not a very strategic player. And I feel like sometimes we don't really hear a lot of him in his self-awareness in the game, right? I feel like that's self-awareness is kind of a lost art with Survivor players, is that, a lot of the worst players we've ever seen, they lack any form of awareness. Like I would think of Russell Hands, right? And the reason why he loses. And so the fact that Ty can recognize this is wild. Another big player, again, to note is just Suri. How she's able to just kind of float her way through the game. She's always good with everyone. Again, a quieter voice this time around, but still always someone where in not a very subtle season, you have to kind of look at the players being subtle. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And Cara, what about you in the matter?
I will say, Chris, hello. Welcome,
always
Chris.
Good to see you, Chris.
Yeah, Cara, I mean, who's standing out to you? Do you agree with Will that, Ty is a player who's kind of floating, needs to figure stuff out? Cerise kind of floating. There's a lot of floater in the game right now. There's a lot of free agents.
That's why I feel like, what happened in this episode, I think it was a big move, and I think it was a good move to get Zeke out. But I feel like there could have been maybe a bigger move made. I feel like they could have done something more this episode. I feel like Aubrey, Sierra, and Suri I feel like they're 3 key players that just aren't getting enough attention from everyone else.
I agree, yes. And I feel like you could have made the move against Brad Culpepper this episode. Like he was, I agree with what you're saying, Cara. There were bigger fish to fry, and I think that came into kind of conversation later on in the episode about and Sarah was leading that conversation. She didn't want Zeke to go home. Is this really the time that we need to focus on Zeke? Look, we can get Zeke out later. Let's take a shot at Sierra right now. And there's other players that are bigger threats than Zeke. Zeke isn't a challenge beast. He is a social, contender. He runs a very good social game, but I also agree with you in the sense that, and I agree with Sarah, that Zeke was a move you could make later down the road. And speaking on Sarah, we also see her reveal that she has an extra vote to, who was it? Suri, I believe.
Suri.
And brings up, or she has to steal a vote, excuse me. And she brings that up. Hey, if we wanted to do something, I could use to steal a vote. This could change how the vote plays out tonight. That was interesting to see that dynamic play out and that conversation happen. Obviously, she didn't end up using it. But, Cara, I think this is a smart decision for Sarah to bring it up. I know a lot of times we're like, you want to hide the advantages you have and all that. But Suri is someone that you can work with. She's well known in the Survivor community. Everybody knows that she's great strategically. Why not bring it up and say, hey, you and me, we could make it far in this game with what I got?
I don't know. I feel like it was kind of random that she told her. I didn't think she needed to tell anyone about the steal vote, especially not yet, because she wasn't going to use it this round. She could have made a move with it and used it, but nothing came from it anyway. So I feel like it wasn't really necessary for her to tell Suri. And does Suri really even trust Sarah, Sarah that much? Because I feel
not.
also, right? So I feel like that wasn't really maybe the best. And also, I thought it was kind of funny how Suri kept calling her Officer Sarah. I feel like that came out of nowhere this episode, unless I just missed it. But I thought that
No,
was kind
she's
of
been
funny.
saying that all season, and please remind me
How did I miss
to
that?
comment about Officer Sarah because I do have a story about that post recap.
How have I
Saying
been
it
missing
all
this? I have
season?
not. Yeah, she's been always
Okay.
calling her Officer Sarah.
I
Yeah,
have
so
not
real
realized
quick,
that.
I was in an org with a player named Sarah, and I called her Officer Sarah the entire time because of Suri and Tony Vlachos. And when she got voted out, I'm like, yeah, you can't trust a cop. And she's like, I work at Hallmark. And I'm like, oh, my bad. So shout out to Sarah.
I
Both
mean,
Sarahs.
I will say, I also to add into that, I love how Tony Vlachos says Sarah. He's like Officer Sarah. Or
Sarah.
how did that? Now it sounds British. It's not. I can't say. He's got that
He's
accent
got
though.
the Boston accent.
He's got that Boston, and I can't say it. Mine came out sounding British, but
Sarah,
it was like
Sarah.
it was like Sarah. Yeah, I can't do it. You'd
Shout
have
out
to
to
go and
Tony
watch it.
Vlachos.
Chris says, "How are you all finding this rewatch? This season I didn't like that much when it aired, but I think it's got its good moments." Who wants to answer first before we get on to the challenge?
Cara? How do you say Cara in Tony Vlachos' voice?
Car.
Car.
Now it sounds country.
Probably.
Experienced
Car.
young lad.
It'd probably be Cara.
Cara.
Cara, wait, we can't start saying Cara now because I know a Cara and I get them mixed up accidentally all the time. So, Cara. How are you finding this rewatch as we're kind of, middle of the season?
I mean, it's been slow, but like I feel like this episode, I don't know, something about this episode like really picked it up for me for some reason. I don't know.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, peaks and valleys. Some really high highs, some pretty low lows, and some filler in between. I think is kind of how I describe the season. It's better on rewatch, though. I will say, I have been enjoying episodes. When I first saw it, I'm like, this is a slog. I hate this season. Boo. So that's the TLDR, and I think we'll explain more during the finale and whatnot.
I'd rather be scratching a chalkboard with my bare nail. No, I'm kidding. No.
The editing is just so frustrating. This episode
editing is
too, it's frustrating.
Yeah, the editing is the frustrating part. There are some incredible highs this season that, I mean, they've gone down in the record books as some Survivor like moments that belong in the Hall of Fame. There are some really, really low, like some really low lows this season. Overall, like if I was to give it a rating thus far, and obviously we got more of the season to go, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm probably giving it a 4 or a 5. Like kind of running the maybe a little below average is probably where I'm ranking it.
Yeah.
But let's get to the immunity challenge. It's a Survivor Classic. You have to one that I would be awful at. I got size 13 feet, so no way I'd be able to do this challenge.
13?
Yeah.
Jesus, Randy. Oh my
Yep.
God. Got Bigfoot over here.
Don't call me that. Okay.
I was gonna say my bad.
No, it's fine. No. So yes, that's a challenge that I would be absolutely terrible at. Plus I'm also just like so clumsy and I trip over stuff in an open room. So like I know I would keep tripping over this contraption. This is the same make that Jake broke in season 45, was it not?
Yeah, kind of. It was similar, but
A lot bigger.
It was bigger. There is something I want to point out. I want to give a shout out to my boy Kenny from Gabon for hacking this challenge in the way where he did the challenge backwards. I'm surprised we still haven't seen it yet. In the 6 iterations of this challenge happening.
Yeah, you go all the way out first, right? And then you
Yep.
place the end and go back, so it gets actually easier than harder.
Yep.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
No, makes a lot of sense. And our girl Andrea actually ends up taking home the prize, wins immunity. Strong moment for her. And for Zeke, this is the last person that you want to see win immunity. Going back to camp, like I said, I know we're only 35 minutes into this podcast and we're about done with what actually happened this episode because it's a pretty straightforward episode. But going back to camp, this is where the chaos kind of ensues. And by chaos, I don't know if this is what you were alluding to, Cara, but this is where the editing kind of got me. It was clear and apparent to me. And I can't blame the editing team for trying to make the episode exciting. It was clear that Zeke was going to end up going home, but they wanted you to believe that, maybe they flip it on Sierra. We had people talking about whether it was the right time to vote out Zeke. Maybe we should go for a bigger name like Sierra. You mentioned earlier Ty's name was brought up out of thin air. It seemed like the editing team was doing everything they could to make you believe that, hey, this is going to be a close vote. And to their defense, it did end up being a pretty close vote.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird because I feel like it's one of those episodes where it was so obvious that you start to doubt it because of how obvious it is, and then with hindsight, it's like, oh, it's an obvious vote because there's been some tribals where the edit is like, all right, yeah, it's Zeke, and then sometimes they subvert expectations where like the player B goes home, to use stock watch terminology, and so I feel like that was kind of the intent behind this episode. It's also because Andrea and Zeke have had beef for a while. I think it might also just feel a little more obvious. And plus, a lot of the characters still in the game still are pretty quiet. Like, Michaela's edit has been really weird. Sarie's edit's been kind of weird. Sarah and Troy's edit have been kind of weird.
There's been a lot of, purple almost edits this season.
Yeah. And so I feel like, I don't know. It's weird, but I understand it,
Yeah.
Cara, when you said that editing felt weird this episode, what were you alluding to when you said that?
The vote and everything and the leading up to the vote, because it was clear that it was going to be Zeke, but like Will said, like I was kind of doubting it going into it. I'm like, is it actually going to be Zeke? Like, that's it? Like, how could it be so straightforward? So I kind of thought maybe something else was being cooked up. Like, we heard Sarah talk about how she doesn't want to do Zeke, and Michaela how she didn't want to do Zeke. So they very well could have made a move against someone else and switched it up, which I think probably would have been an optimal decision for them, to keep Zeke and maybe get out Aubrey or Suri instead. But yeah, so I kind of went into it a little like, is it going to be Zeke? And then Ty's name coming out, and I was like, oh, where did that come from? So yeah.
You keep bringing up, I've noticed this, you keep bringing up Aubrey's name first. So I have to ask, do you believe, in terms of like how you're seeing the game play out right now, Aubrey is the biggest threat, and that's who you believe they should be targeting? I only ask that because I know when you bring up names, Aubrey is usually the first name you bring up.
I didn't notice that, so I don't think it was intentional that I was saying her name first, but like she did stand out to me in this episode. I guess that's probably why, because she mentioned how like Zeke was getting close to Brad and how that was dangerous during the reward. So yeah, I guess that's probably why she stuck out to me in this episode. I really feel like, let me pull up my notes because I wrote it down. I really feel like that Sarah and Michaela should have went with Zeke, Brad, Troyzan, all of them come together and they go for one of the two of them. They couldn't go for Andrea, who would have been a good vote. So if you can't go for her, go for the next closest person to her, which is, one of the two of them. And I feel like it would have worked. They could have got Ty. They probably even could have got Sierra, and then flipped it all around. That's just what I think. It was. It could be risky, but
no, I think that could have been
interesting.
I think that could have been a really good play. My only thing is, I think we started to see the cracks this episode with Brad and who was it? Sierra, who was noticing how he was getting close to Zeke, or was it someone else?
But they voted together anyway.
They did vote together
in the end. So
they did vote
besides
together.
Ty.
I don't know. When they started saying, I think he's getting a little too close to Zeke, maybe that's something that you had to be out on the island to actually experience, like how much they're spending time together, how they're looking at each other, because I just didn't pick up on that. I was like, I mean, I'd be more worried about his relationship with Ty than I am to his relationship with Zeke, because I've been saying all season that I feel like everybody knows that Ty likes to get this strong figure as his like number one running mate. They've been together for most of the season. They were the two guys who sat out for Rice. So I would be more worried about his relationship with Ty in that sense than with Zeke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things too where when you are on the island, you kind of just see the subtleties a lot more. And social maneuvering is very hard to show on an edit, right? It's also why like Survivor can't edit social winners, apparently, except for
We just need a Big Brother live stream type feed is what we need on the island at all times.
I would kill for one. You have no idea. Oh my god.
I feel like them trying to show that was on the reward when they showed Brad and Zeke talking about whatever sport they were talking about, like the games or whatever. That I feel like was them trying to, I guess, put emphasis on it.
Show you like these two are getting super close in this.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let's get to some of Chris's comments here before we wrap up this episode. He adds in, I will say one of the highlights for me was watching Andrea on Game Changer. She became an all-time favorite player for me. I do agree. I feel like she got the warranted screen time that at that point in time I was waiting to get from her. By the way, did any of you know that Andrea and Zeke played in a live reality game prior to Game Changers? Survivor Brooklyn, I believe. I saw a bit of it. I think they were on the same tribe. This adds context.
It does. Survivor's so afraid of showing like and explaining pregame connections until Winners at War with like the Poker Alliance. But like I wish they leaned into it more. I hate how like whenever there's a returning season, they're always like, oh, this is everyone's first time meeting each other. It's like, no, Survivor, you get any alumni on a podcast, they're like, hey, all the Survivor contestants, you know, it's one big family. Once you're in, you can never leave.
I think it'd be cool. It adds to the lore if you talk about like pregame alliances and stuff, because then when we do our like pregame draft or stuff like that, that would come into play. Like, do you think these two are going to be able to work together the entire time and stuff? So I would not be mad if Survivor showed like these two players have already talked before the game, as long as they're like returnees. Obviously, I don't want newbies like already talking to each other.
Obviously.
And then Chris adds in, nah, Cara just hates Aubrey. She's a Michelle stan.
No, I don't hate her.
And then adds in, so I just want to know at this point, her notes have Aubrey written 10 times.
Let me count.
I was just about to say, if he gets
once
this right, you only had Aubrey in your notes once.
Yeah.
Chris, you just accidentally added a 0 in there. You were so close to being correct.
I'm not an Aubrey hater.
You guys want to see my notes for this episode?
Yes.
I don't know if you can see it.
Troyzan.
Troyzan's so wholesome. I thought it again this episode. I think it was during the immunity challenge. I was like, he's just so wholesome. I know when it was.
The reward challenge.
Yeah.
No, it was when Jeff was taking his immunity necklace and he was like the smile and turn or whatever. I was like, that was so wholesome with the hashtags.
I love
Troyzan. Guy, bro. I love Troyzan so much. He's my favorite.
Favorite all time?
Not favorite all time. Favorite on the season, probably, besides Malcolm.
I mean, to add to Chris's point, there's no haters here on Survivor Now. We don't hate anybody. I just might talk bad about someone on this season quite often, but you know, we don't even know who they are because they barely show up in the season. But we will talk about how they reacted again in Tribal Council. A big talking point at Tribal Council, I feel like this season in particular, everyone knows by now, I kind of tune out during Tribal Council a lot of times. I'm finishing up my notes. I don't know what it is. I just kind of tune out. Just a personal problem I need to work on. I need to pay more attention during Tribal Council. This season, I feel like every Tribal Council has had an overall arching theme about Survivor and how to play Survivor and stuff. And this episode was really big on like Are we doing alliances? Are we jumping around? And it really feels like they've reached that point in the game where there aren't really alliances. Like I said, and I meant it earlier when I said the game has blown open after Sarah kind of flipped the game on its head last week. And it feels like we're at that voting block stage where you're going to try to find your people. There's so many final threes and final fives made up this episode. We saw in a preview for next episode where I believe it was Andrea talking about, hey, let's make a girls alliance and go to the end together. It's reached that point where you're just trying to find 2 to 3 people to go to the final 3. Because like I said, at the final 9 now, you have to start having those thoughts, but you can't overwhelm yourself and have too much of those thoughts with still quite a bit of game to go. Cara, do you get the sense that we've reached that point in the game of like voting blocks, find one person and maybe just work with different people vote to vote?
Yeah, I feel like for the most part, like a lot of people are set, not set, but like they know who they want to vote with, they know who they want to continue on with. So I feel like it's that. I mean, there are still people I think trying to figure it out, but like that's kind of how it's been. Everyone's just trying to figure out where they fit in into these little groups of people.
Will, did I miss this? Did Debbie flip the bird?
I wasn't paying attention.
Did she care? Did she flip the bird?
Yeah, when they said Sarah flipped last vote, she had her hands up and they were blurred, so.
What an icon. What an absolute icon. We do have to say goodbye to Zeke in this episode. I mean, super emotional. It got Michaela crying out of nowhere. I mean, that girl was going
nowhere.
Have you? I haven't seen the friendship happen between them.
Okay, you're right. So true.
Usually she's clapping or she's sipping tea, and then they showed Michaela. Now that's the only time they show Michaela is during her tribal council shenanigans.
They always show her, girl. Some they always show.
I will let everyone know that I brought Michaela in before we went on the podcast, and Cara was like, "No, stop it. We're not going down this road." Will, what did you think of Zeke's game overall? Obviously, he played back-to-back, I believe. This is the second straight season. A big name coming in. He made such a mark on his first season. What did you make about his second time around?
I feel like Zeke exemplifies and personifies Survivor 30s. I feel like, and I mean this really well, like the Survivor 30s, it's a very game 4 era of Survivor, where it's a lot about voting blocks. And I feel like the idea of Survivor was shifted on its head. That's when we started hearing about resumes a lot more, big moves. And that whole era, I feel like it doesn't fall on Zeke's shoulders, but Zeke was very vocal both times about how he wants to play hard, he wants to make big moves, and he wants to swing for the fences. And that is something very respectable about Zeke. I don't think it pans out all the time, and I think sometimes he misses a few social beats, and that's always his downfall, because it's like he's someone trying to make these big moves that is kind of scary. Despite that, though, I do think he's someone I'd want to see back for the future, but I don't see that happening.
Not with them blocking him on Instagram for whatever reason.
That was wild. And I feel like Zeke had a rougher go emotionally this season because of the things that happened. But I feel like Zeke always kind of saw a positive with it. And so, I'm not the biggest Zeke fan because I'm not a fan of I don't really care about strategy on Survivor, oddly enough, despite running the I watch it for the personalities. But Zeke was a good foil to a lot of people, and that is always my favorite part about Zeke.
Cara, you and I had the job of covering that super tough episode, and the word that we kept using with Zeke was class. Like, this guy has so much class, and I love how Will put it. always looking at the positives. I almost feel like we saw Zeke grow tremendously this season, like more than anybody else. But he's always going to be a threat, much like, Joe or Ozzy are always going to be physical threats. He's always going to be seen as a very social and strategic threat. And it ended up catching up with him. He made an enemy with the wrong person somehow in Andrea. What did you think of his overall game watching this season for the first time?
Yeah, I like Zeke. I also would have loved to see him come back again in a future season and see him play again. I don't know, I just think he's great. I think he would have been a great winner if he made it to the end on this season. And even in his like little outro thing after he was voted off, like I think he said like I'm a better person because I played Survivor. Like he just seems like a great guy. I
Yeah.
think I feel like he knows that he plays well, but he like almost waits too long. Like he said, he waited too long to make a move. Like he could have made the move again. Well, I guess he couldn't go against Andrea this round, but like I don't know, like he was always like a second too late, I feel like, with everything.
It does kind of feel that. Yeah.
I kind of think the opposite. I think Zeke, I think he pounces
Shows
way
his
too
cards
early.
too soon.
Yeah, I think Zeke,
yeah.
he wants to be in control, and he doesn't know how to be idle. And I think if he turns it on later on, like we've seen recently, with a lot of the new era stuff, it's like you kind of play your cards right early in the game, and then as the game progresses, that's when you start playing more aggressively. Zeke always just plays 100%, and I think that is always his detriment. I think it's less about him targeting Andrea too late. It's just I think he was more active too soon. Personally,
He could have gotten out of going home. There are ways that he didn't need to go this episode.
Yeah, I mean, it was a
There's ways
close
around
vote.
it.
He ended up going home in a 5-3.
2.
5-3-2. And so it ended up being a blindside at the end of the day.
Which is
But
crazy.
yeah,
Because why was he blindsided?
it looked like it was going to be a straightforward
how?
vote. Yeah, it definitely looked like it was going to be straightforward, but it's maybe the season's getting a little juicy now. We had a solid episode this week. Next week, we have one of my favorite things that happened in Survivor. The family visits happen next week. I always love watching the family visits. Like I hate to admit it, but I get super emotional, and I just love seeing like who these people are related to and stuff like that. Like, I don't know. It kind of takes, for a moment, it takes my head out of the game, and then it's so wholesome. I mean, that's the overall word of the episode. You said it with Troyzan, but like I'm going to steal it from you now. The family visits are always so wholesome. I think we covered everything. Do you guys have anything else to say about this episode?
Yeah, I have one thing I want to say. I wish they would have showed like how they decided how Sierra, Brad, and I'm missing someone decided on voting for Ty. Like I wish we would have saw that play out, because they talked about like we saw Sierra go up to Andrea and Sari, and they're like, "We're gonna tell you, like we're gonna let you in," and then we just never see that play out. And she voted differently from them, so I really would have loved to see that portion.
It's also weird seeing Brad vote for Ty after what I said earlier, how I would be worried about that. Like, why would you vote for Ty? He has been loyal to you the entire game. He sees you as this big ally for him, or at least from what we see. And I guess it makes sense that Sierra goes with Brad. They are actually the strong duo that everyone has been trying to target. But I'm with you, Cara. It made no sense to vote Ty in this situation.
And why did they not vote as a block, at least the four of them, you know? Like, why wouldn't they just target someone if possible, you know?
Like,
I don't know.
I feel like this vote was kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have more to add, Cara?
I just remembered that Ty has two idols, and that, you know, that's also something to remember. And I guess Troyzan has one too.
I actually forgot about that. And Sierra has the legacy advantage, and Sarah has the steal a vote. I think those are all the advantages in the game right now.
Yeah, which is interesting how there's straightforward votes like this, like without things being played, you know. Why is no
And
one switching it up?
we're down to the final 9, and you can only play it up until like the final 5. So it's going to be interested to see how all of that gets played. Let's see some of these comments. Chris adds in, I don't care about strategy. Here's the Stockwatch Excel spreadsheet.
I watch Survivor differently. I watch the live episodes differently than I do watch the old episodes. With the new episodes, I watch the edit. Past seasons, I just care about being entertained, which will lead into another comment coming up momentarily.
Yes. Big Show Gano is here. Zeke tries to make moves too fast, so he agrees with Will. And then I like this question from him. For everyone, what is a hot take you have about a season of Survivor, over/underrated seasons?
I got a big one.
I have a massive one.
It better not be related to New Era. I swear to God, Randy, if it's Survivor 41, it's not that good of a season, guys. Hot take. I will actually quit the podcast.
Survivor China is overrated.
I mean, I get it. It reminds me of Panama, where I feel like if you really like the majority alliance or the main group, then you're going to like the season. Like, I love Survivor Panama, even though it's just a straight pagonging, because I like the Kasai group and I love Courtney Yates. But that's besides the point.
That's my hot take. Survivor China is extremely overrated, and Survivor All Stars is amazing.
Wait, what?
Those are that's my hot takes.
What did you not like about China?
Ooh.
I feel like a lot of the people in China just had really bad gameplay. And so like Todd, I love Todd, friend of the show, great winner, but I feel like he was helped out by a lot of the people who just made some stupid moves.
Like, and then Survivor All-Star had strategy?
No, Survivor All-Star I like because it's like, I don't know, it's like a season of the Real Housewives. There's so much fighting and arguing, and I know that's why a lot of people don't like this season, because there's so much negativity surrounding it. But that's why I tune into TV a lot of times. I want drama. I want there to be a lot of, like, I want villains back in the game. I want there to be some, terrible people to root against here and there. Not real life terrible people, but you get what I'm saying. Like, I miss that drama. I don't want everybody. I don't want 18 angels who have been sent straight from above that are just going to play the game so nice. I don't want hugging on the way out. I don't want us to stand and clap for everyone when we vote them out of the game. I want people like Debbie, who's going to flip the bird at you because she's mad she got eliminated. Like, I want that. That is like entertaining to me. So that's why All Stars was so entertaining, because everybody just hated each other. And everyone was just nasty to each other. And that is what reality TV is all about. Awful to say. It's a hot take, and some people are probably not going to like hearing it. But that is what reality TV is all about. It's about the drama. It's about the arguments. It's about the fights. And that's what makes it interesting. I don't want 18 people who love each other and are just happy no matter who wins. I want people to be pissed because you just lost $1 million. Like, that
was kind of like 46. Like, everyone kind of just hated each other, and it was very entertaining.
It was so entertaining.
It was so good.
Amazing.
I was gonna say my hot take is I loved Survivor Nicaragua. I love it so much. I actually have it ranked above Heroes versus Villains and Micronesia and a lot of other seasons of Survivor, including China, including what else? What are some great seasons of Survivor that I liked? Nicaragua over Pearl Islands and Amazon. I also wasn't a fan of Amazon, actually. I think Nicaragua is even more Gabon-esque Survivor Gabon. I love Survivor Gabon. I love messy characters. I
knew you liked Survivor Gabon.
Oh, everyone who knows me knows I love Gabon. Not my favorite season, by the way. I know Jack likes to go off on that tangent. It also has my favorite winner of Survivor, Fabio. Shout out to him. And I think it has some of the funniest moments. like Dan Lembo's final words, where he's like, "Holly, you're a crook. You took my shoes. Did you
Once
cut your hands
again,
off?"
if you're mean to people, it's entertaining. That's what we need.
We have Jane just having beef with Marty, Marty having beef with everyone and being an underdog and lying to Fabio about being a chess grandmaster. We have Jimmy Johnson there for no reason and then realizing, oh, wait, I'm a millionaire. I don't need to go on the show. Jimmy T and Jimmy Johnson also having a rivalry. So many good moments here. And it deserves a rewatch.
That's why. I mean, everything you just said, you kept bringing up rivalries and like heated argument. That's exactly what I said. And when Cara was like, that's season 46, like the Maria and Charlie incident is going to go down for a long time as like, and if they ever face each other again, it's going to be entertaining. Cara, do you have one? Do you have a hot take?
I mean, I agree with you about like, fighting, villains, people hating each other. It definitely makes it interesting. Like 46 wouldn't have been what it was if they all just didn't hate each other,
Yeah.
Like that just made it great. I don't know. I don't know if I've seen enough to like have like the best hot take.
That's
Come
fair.
back to me. Come back to this.
So next week on the podcast, Cara will have a hot take.
I'll have a hot take.
Because Kara's going to watch all 46 seasons between now and next week.
Let's see. We got a few more comments. Chris adds in, I think we all get a free pass now to upset Randy from now on.
Yeah.
That's fair. If I
just say Michaela.
She's still on the season, everyone. She's still there. Chris adds in, I preferred Nicaragua over Gabon. Big Show Gano. I understand China being overrated since it is always so hyped. Yeah, everyone says it's like when talking about what season you should watch first, a lot of times people say like China. I don't think it's that great. Like it's a good season. It's good. Let's see.
I like China.
I knew you liked China. That was one of the first seasons you watched, right?
It was, yeah.
Yep. Big Sugar No. Can we do a second hot take? That was all good stuff. Yeah, I mean we'll think of some. We'll do a hot take podcast, maybe. That would be a fun idea.
Ooh.
And then last question of the day that we'll take. Can we get a mid/cold take from Cara?
Oh my god.
Sandra's overrated. That's her mid take.
I can't say that. I mean, I guess, okay, you know what? That's actually valid because on Pearl Islands, like, I feel like Johnny Fairplay should have won. And I feel like that's probably what a lot of people think. But I think that I don't know. Like, what did Sandra do? Sorry. I'm not a Sandra hater.
I love this, like, fun. Obviously,
I like Johnny Fairplay.
putting it out there for everyone. This goes back to Cara's season of Expedition Online where it was Sandra versus King George and Cara and her audition tape or whatever was like, I want King George. Like, I don't really want to be on Sandra's team or whatever. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's pretty much what you said. And then Sandra was just like, oh, well, I don't want that girl. And then George, I'll give you her. And there's beef there. There's ongoing beef. And I cannot wait till I'm going to have a podcast that's just called Cara versus Sandra. And it's just going to the thumbnail's going to be the two of them like this.
But I can't hate too bad. Like, she's been on Survivor. She's won twice. Like, I haven't been on Survivor. I haven't won. So, like, I haven't even won an org or anything. So,
That's fair. Hey, but you've gotten close. No,
I haven't.
Yeah, Sandra's first win I didn't think was that strong, except for when Fairplay was out of the votes. Yeah, I mean, there's always that argument. But Will, Cara, anything exciting coming up this week before we hop back on here next week? Any exciting news?
I'm going to come back with a good hot take because I did not provide, and I really want to provide good insight. So I'm going to come back with something good.
That's how we're going to start off the episode next week. You guys have to come back next week at same time, 9 p.m. on Wednesday night, where we will be covering episode 10 of Survivor Game Changers. Will, you got anything before we tune off here?
Here's a reminder. If you win Survivor, doesn't matter how, doesn't matter what the vote count was. If you win Survivor, you are the best player that season.
Yep.
and I will die on that
That's
hill.
completely.
I agree.
valid.
Sandra, that includes
Mike Gabler,
Bob.
season 43.
That includes Mike Gabler. That includes Bob Crowley and my boy Fabio.
Well said.
I
Well
agree.
said. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. If you enjoyed this, hit that like button. It helps get the video out there. Subscribe to the channel. Let us know in the comments below, what is your Survivor hot take? Follow us on Instagram at Survivor Now Podcast, on X at Survivor Now Pod. Head over to our Patreon. The link is in the description below. Check out a lot of the great videos we have over there. Pretty soon, we are going to start our Survivor 47 coverage. And by pretty soon, I mean probably next week. And if you're listening on Spotify, go ahead and leave us a rating. It helps the Grow Show it helps the show grow. I was doing so good. This is just part of the podcast. How is Randy going to mess up the intro and the outro? I was so close to being perfect. But anyways, thank you guys for tuning in, and we will see you next Wednesday.